During that wait, I suffered a lot of pain because all I could remember was Kevin Sullivan beating on me, and I was seeing him through a film of my own blood. And when the surgeon got here and sewed me up, he told me that despite everything he could do, I'm going to have a scar here. And that means that every time I look in the mirror, when I'm shaving for the rest of my life, I'm going to see a scar, and I'm going to think of Kevin Sullivan. And that's the last memory I have of him, is him pounding on me, and I cannot go to my grave with that memory in my mind. The memory I want in my mind of Kevin Sullivan, when I see this scar and I think of Kevin Sullivan, I want the memory of him where he is both physically and emotionally and mentally a broken man. I don't want to just break his arms and his legs. I want to break his heart, and I want to warp his mind. He hit me with his best shot, and he busted me open, but he didn't even knock me down or knock me out. Well, Sullivan, if your friends hadn't come down there and pulled me off you, I would have beat you and finished it right there. I want a match with you that will finish it once and for all, till the best man wins. I quit, Texas death. I don't care what kind of match it is, until one man cannot continue, because you and I both know in that last 30 seconds we were alone, you and I both know that I was the better man.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. And I'm your co-host, Ray Russell, along for the ride here on the program. And this week we continue on with the story of Bob's time in the San Francisco territory, big-time wrestling, back in 1977. We've already set the stage. We talked about how Bob became the booker of the promotion. Last week we began to touch on his feud with Kevin Sullivan, and boy, do we have a long way to go there. Bob's innovative booking style, by all accounts, was not a fan by all. Some simply didn't like change, but the gates, the ticket sales, the house records, they don't lie. Bob bringing the territory from down around 4,000 fans at the Cow Palace up to over 8,100 by July of 1977, and then just a month later, and for the duration of the year, that Kevin Sullivan-Bob Roop feud going to bring in somewhere around 12,000 fans each and every month. And we're going to continue on this week with part 3 as we continue to look at that Kevin Sullivan-Bob Roop feud. Bob wishes to share a story about journeyman wrestler Pat McGinnis. And who knows what other twists and turns we may take here this week on the program. So stay tuned. But first, just a friendly reminder, guys, that you can listen to the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop, as well as sister shows like the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF Project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. Currently have 3 projects going on right now with Regional Wrestling, including 1981 Georgia Championship Wrestling with guest Jamie Ward. It's Bill Watts' UWF in 1986 with guest co-host Roman Gomez. And we just started it off, Memphis 1985. We kicked that project off with guest Steve Crawford. And Gene Jackson also going to be thrown into that mix as well on upcoming episodes, so you want to be along for that one. And you guys can listen to all of those shows and more as part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Google, and beyond. And hey, guys, how about that social media? Why don't you guys go and friend Bob Roop over on Facebook? You can find him there at Facebook.com/PoorBobRoop. Bob would love to have you as a friend, hear from you, and you guys can read his daily anecdotes. Lots of life lessons to be learned. And you guys can, of course, follow me, Ray Russell. You can follow me on X, formerly Twitter. You can follow me there at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, you guys can subscribe to my YouTube channel, guys. YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. Actually, just added 6 new videos, all from 1977, big time wrestling, the San Francisco territory, covering a lot of the innovative feuds going on right now via Booker Bob Roop. Some of the angles we already discussed, Pepper Gomez and the ladder, Alexis Smirnoff and Dean Ho and the ukulele. You guys can go check those out right now at my YouTube channel. Also, 3 parts to the Kevin Sullivan Bob Roop feud added. You can find those all at youtube.com/wrestling grenade. Subscribe today. And last but certainly not least, a very important message, especially this time of year. I encourage everybody to head on over to patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. And I'm simply talking to you guys about that $5 all access tier. Get you all sorts of gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed book-like show notes, pages and pages of show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Monday Warfare, and the Regional Wrestling Podcast. You'll also get early access to many of the podcasts here on WrestleCopia, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners, plus remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all. You also get digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure. Just dropped somewhere around 10 to 12 new digital downloads in the past few days, and another dozen or so coming heading into the holidays. So now is a great time to jump on board for the digital downloads. But that's still not it, guys. You also get the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And you get all of that for the low, low price of just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Please show your support. Give it a try for a month. I think you'll like the content that we offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. So please, guys, if you have a few bucks to spare, you're looking to support that next up-and-coming wrestling podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia as I continue to try to bring everybody both information and entertainment. And speaking of information and entertainment, it's time to bring the man on himself. Wait no longer. Welcome him back to his own program, Mr. Bob Roop. And Bob, it is always a pleasure to record an episode of the Wrestling Stoop alongside you.
Same back at you, Ray. I'm having a lot of fun with this, bringing back memories, good times, and the bad ones. I just put those back down. I leave those back alongside memory lane, and just focus on the good things.
Yeah, just discard those in the garbage can of life, because we've got so many great stories going on. We have gotten so much great feedback from all of the shows, but more specifically from West Coasters. Over the last couple shows we've done with San Francisco, lots of Bay Area fans who grew up on this stuff. They remember this stuff, Bob, and we're bringing back memories for them, and they're really enjoying this. So I'm just happy that, this is a topic we chose to do, and I thought it was initially going to be a 3-parter, in and out, basically different, sections of your career there, how you became Booker, then your feud with Kevin Sullivan, and then, close up shop and talk about the falling out there with Roy Shire, but there's just a whole lot more to this than I realized.
Well, you got a point, and going back to the feedback, think about all the conventions they've been having now for years. And I mean, not just recently, but going back, 10, 15, 20 years,
sure, that
are reunions of fans who want to come back and talk to the wrestlers who thrilled them when they were, a lot of the guys were retired, that would come and the fans would get a chance to interact with them. And I know the ones they did in Charlotte, I think Ole Anderson and Scott Teal, I was working with Scott on my own book, and he had written Ole Anderson's book, and they went to, now Ole was really big in the Carolinas, so they went to one of the first conventions in Charlotte, and Scott was saying that he sold 300 books, and he wished he'd had more, because he could have sold them. And that's, to sell 300 books, I don't care who you are, if you're a top of the line author, writer, to be able to sell 300 books, like at one show, like going to a bookstore in Boston, say, and have, you usually can't get 300 people in there, but to have, to be able to sell that many books at one go is a good day. So to have it happen for a wrestler, just unheard of, and when Scott told me those numbers. But of course, now Ole was there for, 10 years or whatever, and he was really over there, so I'm not surprised. But those conventions, and the one I went to this past year, again, at Charlotte, the same thing. There's people there that remembered when, and that's what they want to talk about, was back when. So, that's what we're doing, isn't it? So, onward.
Well, I had a listener send in a message talking about back when. He actually wanted to, I don't want to say he wanted to correct us, but he wanted to make this known just because he wanted to give props to the late, great Alexis Smirnoff here. He says that the initial idea for the ukulele smashing may have originated from Smirnoff because Smirnoff, I guess, had participated in 2 different guitar smashing gimmicks, similar but not the same as there in San Francisco. I guess he did it up in the Maritimes for the K Brothers, and he did it in the Carolinas as well. And I guess basically the story is that it was Dubois, or AKA Alexis Smirnoff, smashing guitars in both instances. Now, Jerome McDonald, the listener, also said at the same time, he's not trying to take away from you. He's not trying to discredit you at all because you were the booker in San Francisco and you did put your own spin on it. Obviously, the guitar became a ukulele, and rather than smashing it against a ring post, you smashed it over somebody's head. So, you changed it up a little bit there. But Jerome thinks that we should give Smirnoff, likely, he should give a little credit too. Maybe he brought the idea to you and you kind of altered it and made it, into your own, innovated it into something even maybe bigger than it was in these other areas.
That's in fact, that's not just a strong possibility. That's maybe what happened, because I don't know. I don't know if I see that coming from my own background or repertoire of because I was fairly young certainly as a booker. I mean, it was my first full-time job, and I don't remember doing anything like that in the past. So it very well could have come from Smirnoff. And, my job, again, was to come out there with a product, and wherever it came from. The great shows we did in Ron Fuller's territory, I had Malenko, the professor, and Ronnie Garvin as a brain trust. And, if we had the stuff that went on the show, probably 60 or 70% of it was from them. Most of our angle stuff came from them. But again, I had the ingredient that I brought to it was the ability to put it out there. That's what you call the office hold. And I always talk to people about, wrestlers who want to talk about, I could do this, I could do that. Unless you have the office hold, that means that you either can demand or you have a way, you're the booker, you can do it yourself. Dusty Rhodes had it in Florida. Dusty was able to promote himself. I think we talked about this. But, he was such a cash cow for him that whatever he wanted to do, they were going to go along with, because otherwise he could take his, he could pack up his banjo and leave and go somewhere else and do it. So, yeah, what I brought to the fan that wrote in, thank you for the correction, because I don't want to take any credit. I had no idea where it came from, but now that he's mentioned Smirnoff doing that angle, logically, because Alex and I were close. Now once I became booker, we weren't as close as we had been, but because I couldn't. But you had to separate. We talked about this. You had to put a little space between you. But I'm sure he would feel free to come to me with the idea. One way that we might be able to find out is, I don't know what we did with Smirnoff and Dean Ho before that, the ukulele.
That was, I believe, if I remember correctly, that was that's what started the feud, because you had to do it all at once.
Probably was Smirnoff's idea, because that's a way that would guarantee that it would, it would be hot.
Right.
We had to do that. We talked about it last week, doing with Sullivan. He just shows up and, he wrestles once or twice and then he's on TV and he's there on a quest. He's there to get me. And that brings him into another league. The fact that I had recognized that he's there for me, and I've been there for a while. I've gotten over, and I'm a main event guy, and so, or at least I'm in the top tier. Let's put it that way. Now that the fact this guy that just came in there is calling my name, if I didn't respond, then it wouldn't mean anything. But I respond to it, and that immediately gets him over. If I consider him a foe, someone I need to worry about or at least think about, then the fans will too. And that's what we did with him. Well, back to the ukulele, that was a perfect way. What it does, it makes it personal. You got a person. It's not just like, I'm trying to be the best. We're wrestling for the belt. No, you broke my grandmother's 200-year-old ukulele, and I'm gonna take it out of your butt. So people can get with that. And thank you to, what was the name of the fan that wrote in about that?
Jerome McDonald.
Jerome, if you're listening, thank you for that. I'm always glad to be updated. So thanks for updating us on that, because I don't want to take credit for anything I didn't do. Again, my main credit that I can give to this is, first of all, I was there. If I didn't come up with the idea, I was the one that had the wherewithal to implement that idea, and I probably was part of it in some way, but at least I could implement it, and I was right there to make sure it got on there, and I was there to follow up, to make the matches and see what they needed. We talked about it last week. For example, when I say see what it needed, when Alexi wrestled against Al Madril, the house there wasn't a great reaction. It wasn't just that. There wasn't that great a reaction to the match. But when the match started, before, when they came out, there wasn't that kind of a excited buzz like, oh, we're really waiting to see something. Segue a little bit here. That angle I did with Steve Kern in Florida, where I assaulted his father, who had been a POW for 8 years, and I called him a coward, which I apologize for many times over. I'm still apologizing. When I came to the ring alone, the buzz was so high. I mean, you could feel it, waiting for Steve to get there. And when he got there, he didn't come walking, ambling in. He hit the ring in a dead run and got up and started kicking my butt. And that's what people were waiting for, because there could be no other expectation. If somebody did that and just had the guys come out and let the referee separate them and all that, especially a guy like the babyface, like Steve, whose father had been, his whole honorable duty had been besmirched by this absolute creep of a heel, he's going to just sit there and go by the rules? No. He's going to beat me up as soon as he can get his hands on me. And so back to Al Madril and Smirnoff in their match, I didn't feel that kind of interest or intensity from the fans. So that's why I was going to take a week off, or 2 weeks. The next show, I was going to do something to build that intensity between them and then bring them back in another main event. But I didn't get the chance because I got the ultimatum. If I didn't do it in the next show, he was going to leave. So, well, I didn't want him to, but once he said that, he had to go. So anything that will get, because the first time Kevin and I got in the ring together, that anticipation was there. And we hadn't, I hadn't done anything to him yet. I hadn't put my hands on him in the territory, I don't think. Maybe I had. I don't think so, though. So,
are you talking about your first match at the Cow?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the story, at least everything I read up on, was you guys did a few tag matches leading into that, but you had always tagged out. You always ran away. You always made sure you never got in the ring with Kevin. So that was his first time getting his hands on you officially.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that gets great heat on me. It also gives him credibility because, I was a heel with a cowardly side to me, obviously. I also had a mean streak, and I was tough. Snedler, I remember one of the greatest gimmicks was Crybaby Cannon, or when he was a blustering manager when I saw him, and when the guy he was managing was gone, he was alone, and the babyface was ready to kill him. He'd get down next and start crying. I mean, tears and everything, snot running out of his nose, and I mean, I thought it was at the time. I thought I was appalled. I thought, oh my God, what is that? But I wasn't smart to, whatever works. If that gets you heat, then fine, go ahead and do it. But I wasn't that kind of babyface or heel. I had credibility, let's face it, and Leppy and all that. Obviously, I was capable. But, when you're a heel, and so you don't run from just anybody. You don't run from Al Madril or Pepper Gomez or Pat Patterson, but you do run from this one guy. Maybe there's a reason you're running, and the very fact that you're running could tell the fans, well, if he's running from this one guy, Kevin Sullivan, he's actually bigger than Kevin, or this guy's in great shape and everything, and yet he didn't want to get one-on-one with Sullivan. He must have done something really horrible that he's worried about getting payback for.
Right.
And so it puts all those psychological elements in there that all of a sudden fans get interested. Well, what did he do? And then, he did this. And then once you have, we can't show any tape or video of the brother getting crippled or whatever,
right,
because it doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah. He's kind of hard to get on tape. Man, he hadn't been born yet.
Yeah, nobody go out there looking for footage of that incident because it does not exist. And I don't mean it's lost to time. I mean, it literally never happened. I don't know that John Sullivan was even a real human being.
Yeah. If Kevin had been smart, he would have said, look, I'm going to insist. I want a payoff for my brother here, even though it doesn't exist. I want him to get at least $50 for being on the program.
It's funny you talked about a payoff, and we're going to get to that in Kevin's father here as we continue to tell this story, actually, when you bring up payoff in the Sullivan family, Bob. But it's funny because, I want to thank Jerome too for writing in, because we do read everything. We listen to everything. You said from the get-go, you wanted to tell everything completely and accurately, and that's what we're here to do. So, I mean, I appreciate people, send in that information. If we get something, wrong, or it's maybe a misremember or whatever. And Bob, you never really actually took full credit and said, I remember I came up with this one night when I was watching so-and-so on the Ed Sullivan show or something back in, it wasn't like you came up with a reason how it came about. So now it makes more sense. It had been done a couple times with the man that does it here in the territory. So it all makes sense, and you put your twist on it.
Well, I'll tell you why I had thought that I came up with it. I was the one that went and bought the ukulele at the toy store.
Sure,
That's why I thought I did it. I mean, I didn't even think about Alex, but that makes sense, because again, even to this day, I hadn't forgotten that angle that we did, because it was one of my first. But then that makes sense. But I do remember going and buying the thing. That's why I think I took credit for the idea. And the stories I'm telling doesn't have any. It's not that I did everything. It's that things happen. And I'm telling about my part in it, but also if it wasn't for the people that are involved in these things, like Sullivan's father and that kind of thing, and McGinnis, and all these different people, Roy Shire and Pat Patterson, all these different people. If it weren't for them being involved in it, my stories would be boring. I mean, nobody wants to hear about just me. I don't think, except me, of course. No,
we'll find a way to squeeze into this episode. Kevin Sullivan versus Bob Roop, part 2. But I would say, I would assume, I guess you would say that a good booker doesn't have to book everything. They have to have good ears, because a lot of guys might have, equally good, if not better ideas, especially for themselves. And then you could tweak it too, put your twists on it to make it different. It's like you talked about last time. Pepper Gomez says, hey, why don't we do this gimmick where, I have this cast iron stomach and people jump off on it, and maybe somebody jumps off and, hits me in the throat. And you said, Pepper, but you done did that before. And here's the kicker, because you said he had done it somewhere else before. He had done it here in San Francisco with Ray Stevens. Now, it was maybe 15 years prior, 1962, I think they did that. Imagine that, a ladder angle in 62. My God, talk about ahead of your time. But Stevens had jumped off, did the bombs away, the knee drop into the throat of Gomez instead of jumping on his stomach. And Pepper wanted to do that all over again. And you said to Pepper, but you already did that. Wouldn't that make you look silly if you fell for it twice? So you guys actually recreate the gimmick, but you change it completely. And guys, that ukulele angle and the ladder angle right now up at youtube.com/wrestling grenade. Go back to 1977, the Bob Roop booking area here in San Francisco. Check it out yourself. You guys, you put a whole spin on it. First, Smirnoff jumps off, lands on Gomez. Okay, he no-sells it. Bob Roop climbs up top. Well, you know what he's going to do. You jump off and you land on his stomach. And now the people that were watching in 62, the people that do remember that, infamous angle, they're going, well, wait a minute, somebody's supposed to jump in his throat. This is different. And then Pepper gets up, and this is where it changes. You take the ladder and drive it into his head, busting him wide open. So there you suckered everybody in. Oh, I thought this was good. Oh, no, they still did something. So it was pretty cool.
Wow. I love it. I'm glad. I mean, it was nice to be able to do something with Pepper.
Well, it's cerebral booking. It's cerebral booking. It's not, the WWF. If you go back and watch, the angle was every 4 years you'd turn a babyface heel, usually on Bruno or Strongbow or somebody. It could be Jimmy Valiant. It could be Spiros Arion. Later on, even Peter Maivia went heel up there, and that was kind of the big angle every few years, and that was pretty much all you got in New York. But man, a lot of other territories thinking outside the box, man, and you certainly had it going here. I loved it.
Well, thanks. I share that credit with everybody that was involved. Kevin was very, very instrumental in our angle. I mean, he had himself, and then the brother, of course, and his father. And I'm surprised we didn't get his mother and 2 or 3 other people in there. Maybe
Roy wouldn't pay for the plane tickets, probably.
Yeah, yeah. Like again in Knoxville, we're fast forwarding a little bit, but you got somebody like Malenko and Garvin. Garvin already been a booker himself up in Montreal, working up there with the Rougeau brothers on a circuit up there in the summertime. He was making the matches and all that, and I didn't even know that at the time when we were getting together in Knoxville. It wasn't until later years when Ronnie and I got together, and we'd ride down the road for a day or two and go visit people, and he'd tell stories. And then it came out that he was running the show up there. He was doing the booking. Ronnie's not that much older than me, but he started at age 15. Actually, he's younger than me, but he'd been in the business, I think, 12 years by the time I got in, which is a lifetime. It takes about 10 years to learn the business if you're ever going to learn it. Where it's not just work or a manipulation of being able to get in a ring and get out there and enable people to suspend their disbelief and start getting into what you're doing. It's not just that. There's a lot of people that are great at that. When they get in the law of diminishing returns, they've been there too long and whatever, and people have seen just about everything got to do, and maybe with 2 or 3 different opponents. Say they've been there 2 or 3 years. Well, does that person, that heel or babyface, whichever one of us, do they have the office hold? Do they have the way to make sure that they're going to be taken care of? Or can the promoter just say, well, you've been here, you had a good run, see you later? And sometimes, you got people who bought homes, who maybe have a business, a side business in the area that, they're planning on staying, but they didn't have what I call the office hold. And that's to make sure that you're going to be around for a while, because you can keep coming up with ideas, and you have the wherewithal, you have the okay to do that, as long as you can come up with things that work. It's very important to have that. That's having that channel into the office where you're always welcome to be part of the booking for your own situation. Again, very few people had the acclaim and the drawing power to be able to do that. So, okay.
Very good lesson learned here on that whole deal. I knew guys like Dusty and stuff had the pull to, get away with things like that. Certainly they were drawing the money. It's kind of like an elite quarterback and he had to call some of his own plays. But,
let me reiterate that just for a second. Before I came to that full awareness of that, I mean, like not just what I knew 20 years ago, but all the times I've thought about it since. One night in Miami, Dusty against Superstar Billy Graham. And Dusty beat Superstar. And then Gary Hart had Hart's Army. And he had the Stomper, he had Pak Song, he had me, he had Dick Murdoch, he had a couple of Samoan guys. I can't remember exactly who they were. Dick Murdoch, or Dick Slater. There were like 6 of us. Ox Baker, 6 of us. And I don't know why, but 5 of those guys ran into the ring. And like idiots, they came one at a time. Because, if you're going to try to glom one guy, well, let's all go in there at the same time, while he's pounding on you, we'll be able to come up behind him with a chair and smack him or something. But one after another, they ran in the ring, and Dusty slid in the ring and got up. Dusty hit him with the elbow, and out they went. And then during that time, Superstar got a chance to recover. He got up and whacked Dusty a little bit and got a little heat back, and then Dusty went, I think, beat him again. What you did is you took all the heat from 5 different heels, as well as Billy Graham, and that all went into Dusty. Now that's having the office hold, because they didn't need to have a ton of heat on any individual in order to draw, as long as they had Dusty. So that changed your whole dynamic in terms of like who gets heat, who do you get hot. A lot of territories said, well, we want to get a heel really hot. We want to have a top baby face, of course, but we want to get a heel really hot. But we want to see, people want to see him get beat. A lot of fans will come to watch the good guy win, but a lot of them won't continue to come just for that unless they're winning over somebody they really want to see get beat. And not just beat, they want to see him get beat up. They want to see him get hurt. They want to see him carried out of there on a stretcher because they've done something by that time that they deserve to be. And people, that's what they pay to see. That's why you have cage matches and lumberjack matches and all that kind of thing, because people we're trying to guarantee you have to do that, because if you don't, the people are going to say, well, Roop ran out of there every time. And then there was no way to not, to keep him there. So why should we pay to go to the Cow Palace again if he's going to get out of there again? So you had to have some way to guarantee that. Another thing is eventually you had to take that whipping. You had to give the fans what they'd pay. Sometimes if you do it right, they'd pay 3 or 4 for 3 or 4 shows, waiting to see you get what you got coming to you. But finally, you have to give it to them. After you give it to them, you have to do something like, say, cripple the guy's father. And then then suddenly what he did to you is all forgotten. Now they want you to do even worse. But you know what? You run. You run again. Now, you didn't run, and they got to see what they wanted. They got your butt kicked.
Right,
but
yeah.
Using your own hold. Anyway.
That's funny. It's funny you mentioned all of that because, I feel like deja vu here from things I've seen in recent days. Because we're going to jump back into 77 in San Francisco at this point. And just a quick recap, guys, of what's been going on here in the Kevin Sullivan, Bob Roop feud. We know Sullivan arrived at the end of June wearing a T-shirt, the Get Roop movement, as he's seeking you out. He's calling you out. He wants you in the ring. Apparently you have injured or crippled his brother from ever getting back in the ring again, John Sullivan, down in the Florida territory. Never happened, guys. But in the kayfabe world, in an alternate dimension, John Sullivan is laid out somewhere, never to be able to wrestle again, all thanks to Bob Roop. And Sullivan, your former friend, has found you here in San Francisco looking for revenge, finally gets you in the ring at the end of July, and he beats you with your own finisher, 2 shoulder breakers, but he doesn't win the TV title because 20 minutes had elapsed, and the title was only on the line for the first 20 minutes of the matchup. That's fine. Still some revenge here because Mr. Roop shows up on TV with his arm in a sling, selling the shoulder breakers, professing to be injured, forcing Eddie Graham, the president of the NWA, to send in a VTR, fining Kevin Sullivan for intentionally trying to cripple you, and then, of course, also threatening to suspend Sullivan if he ever uses the move again, the shoulder breaker, your finisher. So at this point, a rematch is set, but Bob Roop can't wrestle. So in his place, this masked being by the name of the Star Warrior, who also just happens to wear red, white, and blue garb. Imagine that. Now, Hank Renner, the fans, everybody around, especially Kevin Sullivan, seem to believe the man under this mask is, in fact, Bob Roop, who is faking said shoulder injury. And then heading into the next show, I believe August 20th at the Cow Palace, Kevin Sullivan brings in someone visiting. No, not John Sullivan, but rather his real-life father, George Sullivan, arrives in San Francisco to see his son exact revenge on on the Star Warrior. Roy Shire comes out on television here, and he says something along the lines of, this matchup, should the Star Warrior lose, he will have to unmask. Therefore, Sullivan has a chance to prove, if it is indeed true, that the Star Warrior is Bob Roop. That kind of sets the stage for our next matchup. So it's going to be Kevin Sullivan versus the Star Warrior, the man under the mask. Should he lose, he will have to unmask and show the world who he is there in the Cow Palace. But Sullivan also announces he brings out his father here onto the San Francisco television, the big time TV, and his father in town to watch the matchup from ringside. His father going to accompany Kevin to the match.
Yeah, that sounds vaguely familiar. Yeah. Yeah, that Star Warrior, that guy was unreal. I hate to stick around that long, but,
piece of work.
Yeah. Well, not only, the thing with the dad, we actually, I don't know if you ever saw the piece where we had him on television. He was at the gym with Kevin. Kevin was working out, and his father was there. He was like helping him. He was, like adjusted weights and, not doing anything real strenuous, but He was carrying a towel to help him wipe off and all that kind of thing. And he got to say a few things. He did a promo too about crippling his other son, which, that's great, because it gives you bona fides that here's, it's not just these wrestlers who have been known. I mean, believe it or not, have been known to tell a lie from time to time. But here's a father of who's talking about his own other son being crippled by this Bob Roop. Now, the thing was, the father was about 5'4", I think. He was
a short, stocky guy, yeah.
Yeah, he was short and stocky, and he was obviously, a senior citizen. He wasn't like infirm. He wasn't like on a cane or anything, but he was obviously he's probably in his 60s at the time. But
I've got he was 64. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's the age I was getting from everything.
Okay, and it's an older man.
Sure.
Kevin wasn't like a kid. He was an older guy, but the father was very credible. When he made the on TV when he said what he said, and I think we also had him out there with Kevin a time or two doing interviews.
Yes.
Where he was talking about being on the hunt for me too. It was the whole family was still trying to come to grips with the harm done to their family member, and they want to see justice done. And again, it's a way of getting instant credibility. I mean, instead of trying to spend 3 or 4 months building up that kind of intensity by doing something every show, and just gradually building your audience, it's a way to jumpstart it. And you do it with the idea that once you do that, you do jumpstart it and get people coming again. You give them a good enough show that they'll continue to come. They even once your particular angle or your issue is settled, the revenge is gotten. And you can have, maybe you start out with, instead of having just the main event, say me against Kevin, you have a co-main event where there's maybe a tag team match that has an angle, and another single match that has some heat to it. And then again, all the matches on the undercard, that was another thing that really was doing poorly. It's a simple thing as like your first match, the first match of the night. Don't put something that's going to a dud. Don't put a rookie out there who doesn't know what he's doing. Put some guys. In Florida, they used to do it with a guy named Tony Charles.
Oh, yeah.
And Tony was an English wrestler, one of the great. I mean, the guy was great, unbelievable. Those English boys, they knew how to wrestle in the ring. I mean, just even Billy Robinson. I never was impressed with Billy Robinson's work. I saw a match with him and Tony Charles. I'm talking about poetry in motion. They didn't, no punches, no forearms, nothing. But these guys wrestled for about 8, 9, 10 minutes. What a contest, back and forth, and I mean, totally believable. They didn't look like two acrobats, practicing a routine.
Right.
They looked like two guys who were going at it. Psychology, everything was great. But, Billy, you couldn't work that style in this country because the fans are trained to expect something different than that. But Tony was fit. He was agile. He was, he could take a backdrop where he was like 15 feet in the air. I'm talking about, not 15, but 10. And laid out, but he'd go out there and he would they put him with somebody that you didn't ask him to, don't get in a hole, don't ground him. You guys run around and, stay in the ring, but give us about 7, 8 minutes of action to get the people on, get the juices flowing, get the people say, hey, that was great. Then your second match, you can have the newcomer or some guy you're bringing in, you're going to try to get over. You have them go out there and go for 5 minutes and beat somebody. So anyway, what I'm saying is that you don't book a card in just the main event. You want underneath matches need to be important too.
Right.
The order you have and what you're going to do in them. If you're beating baby faces all night, you don't want to do that anyway. Anybody who would do that is out of their mind. You can't. The bad guys can't win more than once or maybe 1.5 times a night, you're going to turn people off. But the way to do good shows is is to let the baby faces win. And even if the heel gets out of there and keeps his title or whatever, and sometimes you don't, sometimes you just go ahead and get beat, you get your heat back on television. That's the place to get it back because it's a lot safer. You don't have to worry about 20,000 people trying to kill you. You're on TV, there's only 100 people there, and you got all them, like half that many wrestlers around. So to come save you, those 100 get mad. But so I think we started off with Sullivan's father being short and dumpy. We got segued all the way down to Tony Charles. But yeah, the first match was important, and that was part of the things. Now, that was part of my duty as a booker. I wasn't asking Kevin or anybody else about advice on how to do this stuff. Kevin and I talked about our angle, and Smirnoff talked about things that he thought he could do with Dean Ho. I don't remember if Dean ever contributed much or not, although I'm not saying he wouldn't or couldn't. Dean was a wonderful guy. He was a really nice human being. In fact, they all were. All of them were. We were getting along good. Everybody was having fun. So what a wonderful place to work out there in San Francisco. I got short trips. You got good pay, beautiful weather. Yeah, it was a beautiful place to work. I could see why, guys wanted Ray Stevens and Patterson stayed out there for, 15, 20 years.
A long time.
Yeah, and I don't blame them. That's a great place to work. So
well, you talked about Sullivan's father showing up on TV. There's actually footage of that out there. And the video, I don't have the video, the workout video, but I've read about it. And in regards to Kevin Sullivan working out, his father being by his side, I guess it was set to the theme from the Rocky movie, which was still pretty popular by this point in 1977. So got that fresh on everybody's mind, playing the Rocky theme as Kevin's getting ready for the big matchup against the Star Warrior here. But it's just, what layers, not only are we doing the unmasking gimmick in this matchup, but now it's father ringside as well to watch Kevin get that ultimate revenge for the Sullivan family as finally the time arrives, Bob, August 20th, 1977, another intense filled match. Sullivan ripping at your mask during the encounter, even exposing some of your head in the process, done by design to tease the unmasking, but also to showcase the gusher. Maybe a little gig there, as a bloody forehead on the Star Warrior would follow. Kevin eventually, though, he's going to lock the Star Warrior in an abdominal stretch, leaving the masked man wide open for the referee to check that gash on his head. And the ref, he checks on said cut, and he calls for the bell, the referee declaring the Star Warrior unable to continue due to excessive blood loss and perhaps visual impairment, not really sure. But as you might suspect, the crowd of nearly 12,000. Remember when you got started, it was 4,000. By July, it was 8,100, I think. And here we are in August, 12,000 people here in the Cow Palace. They explode here, not only for Kevin's victory, but because they know that the Star Warrior will have to unmask.
Wow. Wow. Memory lane. I don't remember all of that. Okay. You got me hooked now. Where do we go from here?
Well, here's where I'm going to tell you what happens next, Bob.
Okay.
So this warrior guy, this guy in the hood, he has no intention of following through with the pre-match stipulation. So he tries to escape the ring, but he gets caught in the apron, Kevin pulling him back inside, grabbing one hand by the mask, drilling him with a bunch of right hands until finally yanking the mask off of this Star Warrior. And the man under the mask proves to be Bob Roop. Well, I'll be damned, Bob.
I can't believe it. That rotten. Oh, wait a minute. That's me, isn't it? What a horrible thing to do. Well, you know what? That old man had it coming. Well, what am I talking about? I'm the one that got it. So, yeah, those are fun times because you know why? We talked about it the last couple of shows, is that those folks out there hadn't seen this, or at least not much of it. So, and you didn't have cable TV yet where, you could see everything in the country. Right. So, this was new stuff, and it had that, like new stuff type of response to it. Like, it worked. It works the way it's supposed to when you don't know that, okay, in Florida when we did it, they did it 3 years ago, and then 2 years before that, and then 3 years before that. So longtime fans, like in Miami, who've been coming for 15, 20 years every week, have already seen this 3 or 4 times, and what you're doing. So it doesn't have quite the same appeal as it does to an audience that it's a virgin audience to this kind of thing. And I do remember that kind of response. It was like electric, and it was like in the atmosphere, especially in the palace, in the Cow Palace. I remember that I could just feel it in the air. It was just a buzz going. There was always anticipation, like we were trying to fool the audience, and like with the latter thing you're talking about, instead of doing what they thought was going to happen, you do something different, and you create some, hey, wait a minute, this isn't going like I think it was supposed to go. Wait a minute. It couldn't be real, could it? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Maybe these guys are real.
So at this point, Kevin Sullivan, he beat you last month, used your own move against you, pinned you. Then you tried to psych him out, pretend like you were injured. You wore a mask into the rematch here, and he beats you again with his father now ringside. So maybe the Sullivan family has finally exacted their revenge. Or maybe not. As the fans celebrate Kevin's victory and Bob's unmasking, Sullivan's real-life father, George, entered the ring to enjoy the moment with his son. The fans, emotionally invested in this family story, felt that cathartic moment along with the Sullivans. Now, as future horror films would teach us, Bob, you never turn your back on the villain unless you're 100% sure that he's quote-unquote dead. Kevin, he left you a bloody mess on the mat, unmasked and laid out. But he didn't put the final nail in the coffin. So that allows you to recover behind the Sullivan family's back. And this leads to Bob Roop, guys, recovering from the beating and attacking Kevin Sullivan, tying him up in the ropes. And when Father George tries to grab hold of Bob to get him off of his son, as any good father would do, Bob, you turn around and do the unthinkable to a 64-year-old retired man who has never been in a wrestling ring in his life. You scoop him up and deliver, well, I've heard that you try to take care of him, but the way he went up, it's one of the nastiest looking shoulder breakers I've ever seen in my life. And Kevin Sullivan's father has to be stretchered out of the arena. So once again, you get them. Last time he pins you, but on TV he's fined, threatened with suspension. And here he thinks he's got you again. He beats you again. You unmask. How could you possibly get revenge? Well, you took out his brother and now you take out his father. And I can't believe you got that white hot noise where the crowd goes silent for just a moment. That's a scary time there before they just explode in rage.
And I do remember this very vividly. This I remember doing because those are the kind of, those moments are like etched in your titanium in your memory files. Got Kevin tied in the ropes and I was pounding on him and his father, was at his side and, he's like, pulling up my arm, trying. I think when I was trying, maybe choking Kevin or whatever, he was like pulling up my arm, and I brushed him aside a couple of times, and I go back to pounding Kevin. And about the third time I brushed him aside, I stop for a second. I look at him, I look back at Kevin, I look back at him, and I grab the old man, pull him out in the ring, and give him the shoulder breaker, and I hit the bricks. Because I did stick around. We'll get into this later about you got to know when to leave, when to get out of there. Because if you stay, I'm talking about 10 seconds too long, you're making a serious mistake. Because that's all it takes for the aisle to close up, with you still on the wrong side of things. You're not that. Well, as soon as I gave him the shoulder breaker, I didn't take a lap around the ring going ha ha ha. I slid out of the ring and took off. I didn't run, but I took off. And the people, I watched. I went by them. I was watching. Just believe me, I was watching the people on my way out because there were no cops there yet. They weren't expecting to leave yet. So I'm going down that aisle. I wasn't going to wait for them. I wasn't going down the aisle. I'm keeping my eye on the people. Everybody's on their feet. They're looking at the ring to see what's going to happen. Is the old man dead? Is he going to get up? What's happening? Kevin's tending to his father, and the downstairs part was about 3/4 full. So I remember there were maybe 4 or 5 rows of empty seats at the very back. When I got that area, I was much more comfortable, but I timed it just right. because when I looked over my shoulder, the people from the rows I'd already passed were starting to come back down that aisle after me. And I got in the back, and the cops were back there, so I didn't have a problem. But yeah, I had a ton of heat. I forgot all about me getting beat. I forgot all about it.
Yeah. That's how you book. That's booking. I mean, it's amazing because we're deep in this story now, a couple months into this story. And every time it seems like there's no plausible way that the heel's going to get his heat back, you somehow find a way. And I mean, you really found a way. And for people that think that Bobby's maybe exaggerating about how quick he got out of the ring, this match actually exists. The film from the Cow Palace is up right now on my YouTube channel, guys. You can go watch the closing several minutes of this match, including the post-match shenanigans, the unmasking of Bob, and delivering that shoulder breaker to George Sullivan. What a rough bump he took. But you didn't waste any time getting out. I'll put it this way. Kevin, is being unhooked from the ropes as you deliver the move to his father. But from the time Kevin gets free until he can make it to his father to check on him, you're already long gone. That's how quick you get the hell out of Dodge. You don't even want to stick around to see what might transpire. So it made total sense to me. And Kevin lay there over top of his father, checking on him. We see a stretcher come in. They stretcher his father out. And then there's also a clip from TV following that where Roy Shire comes out. Remember last time Sullivan beat you? He got lambasted by Eddie Graham. Well, this time Roy Shire comes out and he says to Kevin, well, I told your father he can't get in the ring. So he's not going to do anything about it because he said, if I stick up for your father, then I have to stick up for every wrestling fan that tries to get in the, during a match. So that was Roy's reasoning. So I don't remember if Kevin got fined for his, it's amazing. His father was crippled and sent to the hospital, and Roy Shire's laying out a fine because his father got in the ring to get crippled. Just amazing story. People had to it was like icing on top of icing for your heel heat at this point.
Yeah, I had to talk Roy into doing a lot of that stuff. He didn't like it. He didn't know what was going on. I said, just trust me, And again, you had that house, you had the seats being filled, going.
Roy, I'm bringing you 12,000 in. Just shut up and do what I'm asking you, please.
Yeah. Well, I had credibility by that time, and he didn't like it. But he was a lot happier. Let's don't even worry about what Roy was doing financially. That might be illegal or wrong. Just if he'd been doing everything right, he was making a lot of money.
Right.
Because, you only pay the building 15%, something like that. And, the rest of it's yours. You have costs. You got to pay your talent, of course. But even that's only supposedly 30% of your gate. And very few promoters ever honored that. He might walk out, legitimately walk out with, made $25,000 or something like that night. Well, you're doing that twice a month. That's a pretty good month, $50,000 from one building. So, regardless of trying to take any, icing on the cake itself is pretty good. So he had a lot to be, he had a lot to protect there. What a pickle for him to be in. He didn't have control of it. We alluded to it an hour or so ago that perhaps wanting to have that control was to make sure he protected his baby there, his walking Scrooge McDuck bank vault that he was able to fill up as much as he wanted to. He wanted to protect that by having control of everything that he could. But if you got somebody else that comes in and that is, making you a lot of money, that can, I'm sure that had an effect that he was going to ride it out and see how far it went. Well, that's good stuff. Yeah. But getting out of there was critical. The timing was, especially out there, you had a bunch of people. I referred to it on our first West Coast show. We talked about fans that were there just to try to get a lawsuit by getting a wrestler to smack them or something.
How did you go about doing this shoulder breaker spot with George Sullivan? Did you take him aside? Did you guys talk it over with him? Did you try the move once before the fans came in the door? Did you guys do anything to get him ready? Because obviously his son was a wrestler, but how much did he actually know about the wrestling business? Clearly he appeared and did the gimmick on TV talking about his crippled son, so he got it to some degree, I guess, by this point. I was just curious how you set things up to perform a wrestling move on a non-wrestler back in the 1970s in the kayfabe era?
Well, I do remember he wasn't hurt, although trying to think of me. And of course, when I was 64, I was stiff from, 32 years of amateur and pro wrestling, which have a tendency to, give you arthritis and every other kind of joint and tendon and muscle problem. But he didn't have that. But I've got him around the waist, and I've got my left arm under his left shoulder so that when he comes down, he doesn't actually, the only contact he makes with my knee is just to stop him. I don't bounce. I mean, with guys that were fit and, Jack Briscoe, say, somebody like that, I could bounce them off my leg because it wasn't going to hurt them.
Right.
And that way they'd rise up in the air a little bit. And, in one case, I almost looked like I got up and body slammed, came down on top of them, slammed them because they bounced high enough. But usually it was to make it more spectacular, where it looked like they bounced off my leg. I had them around the waist of my right arm and my left arm under his shoulder. So when I brought him down on my knee, as we would come back up, I would toss him with my left arm.
Yeah, I just saw a match with you and Mike Jackson. that was a really good one last week. Yeah. And that way, it looked like it did. It was a vicious, nasty looking hole. That's why when I did it in Germany, everybody laughed. I got a little bit upset, but if I'd have set the guy's head on fire first, they probably would have laughed even more. But I was just curious, if there was any prep for him, because he had never.
No.
I wasn't necessarily worried about you actually executing a move. It was more so just picking a 64-year-old man up, because when you go back and watch this video, it's not pretty, like his landing, and it has nothing to do with you. It's just he's just kind of like a loose body, kind of getting scooped up and driven down. So I was just curious, how that all went. But apparently he was okay, even though reportedly, I guess the storyline wise, you guys even went and put him in a fake arm cast or something and took pictures to show on TV after the fact that you had crippled him. So George Sullivan now out, John Sullivan now out, Kevin Sullivan certainly looking for revenge. You'd have to imagine at this point, you're in some deep doo-doo the next time he gets you in the ring. So here in August, just another roller coaster, much like last month. And just when you think there's no way in the world you can top that thing, you guys do. It gets even more interesting as the story progresses. But you simmer it down, kind of like that Al Madril thing you were talking about. Hey, let's take a show off so when we bring it back, we can come up with something even better. And so in September, you actually worked Dean Ho at the Cow Palace. But also in September, this is here comes the Pat McGinnis story. Fair warning, Bob. A newcomer to the territory comes in by the name of Pat McGinnis. And you've mentioned him off air to me a few times now. You say, wait till we get to that Pat McGinnis story, or you're going to talk a little bit about him. You said he might take up a whole episode by himself. I'm hoping that to be a little bit of an exaggeration here this week. But that's it. We're here in September. So what better time to take a brief break from the Sullivan-Roop feud and talk a little bit about this former wrestler, Pat McGinnis. And before you get going, Bob, just want to refresh everybody on who McGinnis is. A journeyman wrestler. I can only find results from wrestling maybe 5 or 6 years in the business from the mid to late 70s. And he kind of jumped around from the WWF to Florida, here in San Francisco, Los Angeles. I think he's best known in Memphis. I think they gave him the belt there for a few weeks' time anyway. So that's pretty much all I know on Pat McGinnis. The best way I can describe him, guys, a burly dude, not really defined, but he's a pretty thick guy, and he even did some strongman type things on TV in certain territories, ripping phone books and whatnot. But that's really all I got on him. So I'm looking forward to hearing whatever you have to tell us.
I just want to segue back just for a second.
Yeah. Sure.
You're talking about the intensity of what it looked like when I gave Mr. Sullivan the shoulder breaker. Mm-hmm. I think that explains when I talked earlier about the fans standing there and not looking at me, they were looking at the ring. I think that they were trying to see how badly he was hurt. Because it must be, because I just ignored me until I actually got by him. Now, it probably 10 seconds hadn't gone by since I shoulder break him, or gave him the shoulder breaker, and now at the end of where the people are sitting, and I'm kind of in the clear. But I know that going by him, nobody was looking at me. They weren't like, oh, I'm going to kill you. They were all watching the ring. And I think that I'm trying to remember. I can't think of what Kevin could have been doing that would have been so enthralling, except, protecting his father.
Yeah, he was hovering over his father, checking on his father. And I think you're right. I think the crowd was just very concerned at first. They had forgotten about you for a second because they were more. I think you're right. They were like, well, I can't. They're still processing the whole damn thing just happened. And you got out of there just in the nick of time. Like, it was just that 10-second period they needed to go, where did that son of a bitch go? And then you're already gone. So, yeah.
Well, if I stuck around, I mean, Kevin had not that what the only thing to do is beat the crap out of me again. I've already been beat, and and that worked out. Okay, on to Pat McGinnis. Kevin came to me and said, Bob, I got a buddy from back east, and he needs to. I think he told me he needs to get out of town. Okay. He needs to get hide and be scarce out there. McGinnis that's funny. You mentioned the Rocky movie earlier, and Rocky in the movie, Rocky was a loan shark collector. He collected for a loan shark. Well, that's what McGinnis did. So Kevin said, "Can you book him? Can he come out here?" I said, "Yeah, I can book him. I'm not going to use him on top because I'd never heard of him. So, and that doesn't mean he's a nobody. But he hadn't been on any magazine covers or his name wasn't. Wrestlers are always talking about other wrestlers. I just hadn't even heard his name before.
Right.
So anyway, it turned out I don't know exactly why. I ended up going to the airport to pick him up, and I took him to my apartment. So he was going to get some place to stay, but until he did, he was going to stay with me for a day or two. And the guy was, he was big, rugged-looking guy. I mean, he was maybe 6 feet tall, but probably 250, 60 pounds, solid. And he had a distinguishing mark that I'd seen one time before, was the back of his left hand. He had a bite mark on it. Harley Race was the only other one I saw that had the bite mark. And when I asked Harley how he got it, he told me that he'd been in a bar and having a few drinks, and there was some guy that was giving him crap, and the guy kept talking about wrestling being fake and all this kind of stuff, and Harley just ignored him. And finally, when the guy got close enough, Harley made a move with his right hand, like he was going to draw back and like punch him. But instead of doing that, he lunged with his left hand and came up with the fist into the guy's face. Sometimes, like Harley did, and like apparently McGinnis did too, you catch a guy in the mouth. And I mean, when I say catch him, you drive his teeth into your fist to the point that there's I'm talking about a serious bite mark. Looks like a person's mouth. Like if you took somebody's dentures and hammered them into the back of your hand and then pulled them out, that's what it would look like. Well, Harley told me I got his, ultra violence. He hit the guy with his guy. The guy went down. Harley kicked him in the head a couple of times and went back to his beer. Well, so here shows McGinnis was the same thing. So I said, well, I assume you didn't bite yourself. How'd you get that? They said, I had a guy that I'd already talked to him a couple of times and broke his wrist, and that wasn't enough. So I had to go a little farther. So I'm looking. I said, yeah, and what beat up your wife, or what was it? What happened? He said, no, to my job I collect for guys that owe money. These guys just said, you got to chase them down and all this. And, you finally find them and they beg and they give you all these stories and everything. And he said, but if I've had to look for 2 or 3 days, I've spent all that money on gas and my time and all that. The guy didn't have any money at all. Well, he's got to give me something. This guy had to give me some teeth. I thought, oh, wow. So now he was very matter of fact about this. Here's the guy like talking about, he's telling you how to change a tire, how to fix brakes on a car or something. Just matter of fact. And he started talking about dogs. He said, yeah. He said, I love dogs. He said, he said, I had a Doberman for a while, but he said, I got a Mastiff now. And he said, I love that dog. He said, oh, they're so great. And he said, great dog. I thought, well, this guy sounds like kind of a, badass, but, a guy that has that kind of good heart for a dog and everything, because he sounds like a pretty good guy. He said, yeah, he said those Mastiffs, he said they've got the kind of biting power in their jaws, like almost up there with the shark. It's like 6,000 pounds per square inch. I said, well, what does that have to do with, why is that important to you? And he said, well, when a guy just made it clear he wasn't going to pay, I already broke his leg, his arm, whatever, he had to pay some way. He said, what I did is I took first a Doberman, and then with the Mastiff, I trained them that anybody that came near my car, that they were to kill. They were, I would put them in a car, and anybody came, I'd leave the window open. He said I'd get a broom handle. I'd poke them and torture them with the broom handle. So they got to the point that if anybody came near the car, they'd just go berserk. And I said, I guess nobody's going to steal your car. He looked at me like I was a moron. He said, no. He said, no. When I finally, I had to look 3 or 4 days for the guy. After the 3rd day, I'd bring the dog along, make sure. He said, I'd find the guy. He said, I'd know where he was. What I'd do is I'd leave the window on the car. I'd leave it down about 4 inches. I'd go get the guy, make sure he'd come along one way or another. He might have a broken leg or something, but I'd make sure he got there. And he said, and what I'd do is I'd take him up, I shove his face in that 4-inch gap in the window and let the dog go to work on his face. And he said, that Doberman he just wouldn't get it done. I mean, I'd rip a guy's face up. But that Mastiff, that son of a bitch that dog would bite a guy, would eat a guy's face right up his head.
Damn.
And yes. I'm looking at him, I'm going, wow. Okay.
Did you sleep with one eye open when he was staying with you? Dear God.
No, I wasn't worried. He didn't have the dog with him. He went out the dog on the plane.
He just seems capable of doing anything at this point.
Well, I'm the guy's boss. If the guy wants to work, I would say I wasn't worried about him myself.
It's also pro wrestling. As crazy as that sounds, I'm sure there's plenty of other much crazier stories.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there are too. But no, I believed him. I mean, I believed that because he showed me.
Oh, I believe
he had a sort of a one-track mind. That track was, he was barreling down that track full of speed ahead when he got motivated. That's what made it later on when I sicked him on Shire, what made it so funny, or so great, as a way to keep Shire away from me. But I found people like this interesting. Now, you out there listening, and you think, well, that's Bob, that's kind of repulsive, that you wouldn't be totally disgusted and repulsed and not want to have anything to do with people like that. And yes, you have a point. But again, this is pro wrestling. This is the real world. You think everybody came to match was from going to church on Sunday after Saturday night matches? Maybe they were, but it's because they had a lot to beg for, ask for forgiveness for. Pro wrestling is a violent, simulated violent sport. If it was real, my God, it'd be worse than back in the Roman gladiator days where they did fight to the death. Yeah. If it was real. But we simulate the very worst stuff possible. We have people bleeding. We have women getting beat up. We have children being hurt. We have people getting hit with chairs. We have guys throwing fire in each other's face. We have guys being blinded. We have all these kind of things going on.
We even have assholes trying to cripple people's old fathers. I mean, all kinds of...
We have a total coward who will pick on people's aged fathers and, karma and say what goes around comes around. I let my 2 boys, youngest sons, and I own a home together. I wonder if that's why I'm getting so much grief these days. It's my turn. No, we get along, but they do like to ruin me.
So this guy comes into town. It's funny you mentioned he was a friend of Kevin's, or Kevin knew him, because they're actually both from Massachusetts. So that makes sense, the connection there. Maybe they knew each other from, the New York territory. I know Kevin had been there fairly recently, and, McGinnis did come through there as well. But yeah, so here we go. He's in town now. He's staying with you a couple days, going to get his own place, and you find out some very interesting information. I can't wait to hear where we go from here.
Yeah, and segue a little bit. We were talking about Chris Colt.
Yes.
And Chris being gay. Now we haven't gotten there yet, but I want to just let our listener know that Chris, the first night Chris and I went out together, I was out there alone. Later on, my girlfriend from Florida came out and stayed with me for a while, and that didn't work out. I ended up sending her home. And later I married her, but not from there. And so But when I went out with Chris, I didn't know he was gay. He wasn't really like feminine. And don't get me wrong, I have no bias about anybody being anything. I mean, I don't like axe murderers for that much, but I said, Chris knew San Francisco. So we were together on a Saturday evening. I said, well, let's go where we can, maybe find some girls, and, maybe dance or something. He said, Bob, I'm gay. I said, okay, let's go find a place where we can both find somebody to dance with. And that was it, but what happened with Chris, and we haven't gotten there yet, but it was a way for me to have like an escort. I would have an escort into San Francisco being the gay capital of the universe. I would have an escort into that world of someone who was familiar with it so that I could learn about different lifestyles,
right.
homosexuality,
right.
without, and get over any prejudice I had. A lot of prejudice usually comes from ignorance. You don't know.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know about things. You're afraid of things you don't understand or don't know about. I don't like the idea of spending my whole life trying to educate myself. And so here's the thing. With one of the boys, that was our bond. One of the boys, I wasn't a booker yet. We were both workers, just working there. But I had a guy I could trust. He wasn't going to in any way compromise. Now, he ribbed the heck out of me. We'll get into that, but he wasn't going to compromise his standing in the pro wrestling world for his personal life. And I knew that. And plus, and not just an Olympian. One time, Fritz von Erich was going to have me take on the toughest guy from each professional NFL football team all in one night in Dallas. And when I thought he was serious about it, he was, but he couldn't make it happen. I went on, I thought, well, just being a wrestler isn't going to be enough. Some of these guys are former national wrestler, NCAA champion wrestler heavyweights. I'm going to have to learn some martial arts too. And so I had trained in martial arts and a bunch of different things. I mean, not to be a black belt or anything like that, but just enough to know how to defend myself from a lot of different stuff. So I brought all that to me with going out with Chris. I wasn't worried about, we went to places, the first Rebbe pulled on me. We went to that club that were somebody for both of us. The only female in the place was the singer in the band, and she had 4 guys, big guys backing her up. That was the only female in the place. Everybody else was male. And I was at the bar no longer than about 5 minutes, and I felt something poke me on the buttock. I don't want to say in the butt, but on the butt. I turned around. I'm looking at the top lapel button on a guy about 6'8". I look up and he's smiling down at me. But as he looked at me, he went, "Oh darn!" He knew I wasn't gay because I didn't smile back. So, and that was Chris's idea of a rib, which I thought it was funny. But I didn't feel threatened. Nobody was they're not gonna force you to do anything. I mean,
sure.
Not so. It was a way to learn about things.
So you were very open-minded in an era where it wasn't cool to be open-minded. I mean, you obviously you understood the whole ignorance of things. Like, hey, I want to learn this stuff. I want to see what's going on out here in the communities and the lifestyles and things like that. Because Chris Colt was quite an interesting character by all accounts. It has nothing to do with his sexual preference either. I mean, but that's pretty cool. And I do have that on my list of topics for sure. Because Chris Colt is an enigma in and of itself. So I'm looking forward to talking more in depth about him down the road. But I don't want to get too lost astray from this Pat McGinnis stuff here.
No, I was just coming back to that. The reason I told that about Chris is the same thing with McGinnis. I wanted to learn about that kind of life. I had just seen Rocky about, I don't know, a month or two before. And, I've seen the kind of guy, the loan shark, the Gunsel type guy.
Yeah, bone breaker.
Bone breaker, and I wanted to learn about that kind of mentality. I mean, what motivates these guys? What creates this kind of a person? And so, it was interesting to me. And again, I didn't feel in any way threatened. When the guy brought the guy out, I was a booker, so I was his boss. And, I could fire him. I mean, I would never have to see him again. And the other thing is, he didn't have that dog, and he didn't have any weapons on him. I could handle him. If he didn't knock me out with the first punch, which he wasn't going to do, because I wasn't going to let him get close enough to do that, I would take him down and just eat him. I mean, I would do whatever I wanted with. I wrestled guys that were, I mean, big, 100 pounds heavier or solid muscle, great big weightlifter muscle. Ole Anderson used to, as a rib, used to get the biggest, strongest guys you could find to give a tryout, and I got to be the one to go try out with them. I didn't mind, except for the fact that it's almost impossible not to get hurt somehow, even if it's just pulling a muscle or something. But anyway, so I wasn't worried about that part. And plus, McGinnis, his social graces were there. I mean, he wasn't Mr. Laugh a Minute type guy, but he was appropriate and everything. And I mean, I didn't look it, but I was a tough guy too. I didn't break people's arms and legs. I could, but I didn't want to. Now, if he did that for a living, well, I wanted to find out more about that. Now, I wasn't going to room with the guy. He stayed with me a couple of days, and Kevin got him a room or something. He was an interesting guy, but he was a nightmare at times. But I got to share the nightmare. The nightmare for me was absolute horror for Roy Shire. But McGinnis would do things like, I had him in a match against Kevin on TV, and I had made him like my gunso, my personal gunso. I was making Kevin wrestle these other guys in order before he could get a match with me. He had to beat these other people, and McGinnis was one of them. And we're on TV, and all he's supposed to do is I'm in the wings. I'm about 20 feet away. I'm off camera, and the studio audience couldn't see me. But there was nothing between me and the ring. It wasn't like glass or a wall or anything. But I can see what's going on. And I told McGinnis that he had Kevin tied in the ropes. I went out and I slid a chair in the ring, and then I went back and hid behind the curtain again. So McGinnis picked up the chair. All he had to do was go forward and whack Kevin. That's all he had to do. What was going to happen was before he got to whack him, Kevin was going to get free of the ropes and smack him and take the chair and run him out of there. And then Kevin would have the impetus for a great promo he was going to make about, I just saw Bob Roop come out here and hand McGinnis his chair to try to cripple me, where I was trying to avoid him again by putting other guys running interference for me. So McGinnis does everything's great, gets Kevin tied to ropes, slides the chair, and he picks the chair up. I'm watching from the wings. I'm going, oh wow, he's going to do it. It's going to be great. He raises the chair up high overhead. He's got his arms, straight out. The chair's about, 7-8 feet in the air. And he just stops. He's facing Kevin. Kevin's tied the ropes. The referee's doing something. And he just stops. And he looks around a little bit, and then he looks over at me. And I'm making the motion like I'm move my arms like I'm holding the chair, like hit him. Kevin, was tied in the ropes, but I mean, he's not tied in there like with steel cables and chained to him. He can't stay in there forever and keep his credibility. And I'm telling you, when those seconds are ticking by like that, each second seems like a minute long, because it just, you're seeing the way this thing was going to work. He has to do it now. He can't be 3 seconds from now. So Kevin had to get out of the ropes before McGinnis could ever even start to whack him. And he smacked McGinnis, and I ran out there and grabbed McGinnis. Otherwise, McGinnis was going to stay out there and let Kevin whack him, 50 times for all I knew. I had to get him out of there. But that was just a typical example of what I was dealing with McGinnis, of having these, I don't know, you go into another time, another dimension, the ozone somewhere, but his mind went somewhere. But see, that didn't have anywhere near the effect that it would have had if McGinnis actually was on his way to smack him, and Kevin managed to get out. Kevin was supposed to get out the last second,
right?
And McGinnis was going to whack the top rope like it would have brained. I mean, it would have crushed Kevin's skull if he'd have hit him with that metal chair. But Kevin was going to have one arm free where he could duck down and it hit the rope instead of him. And then he was going to get the arm free and smack McGinnis, and McGinnis was going to take off. But see, we didn't get to do that. We didn't have that one violent smack with a chair because McGinnis just, again, mind went somewhere. So Kevin didn't have the impetus for a great interview that he would have had Pat did things like that, and again, my memory of them I have fond memories of them because it's a good story. I mean, it wasn't the end of the world that didn't happen. He was fine. I was okay in the ring. I mean, his matches were okay. Nothing special. There wasn't any way to get him an angle with anybody, but he wasn't going to be out there that long anyway. I think he was only going to be. You needed to lay low for 6 weeks or something. Then if the warrant ran out or whoever was looking for him in Boston, whatever. Yeah, another time, and I want to say Fresno. No, not Fresno. Salinas, one of the small towns. Another time, I was wrestling Kevin. I said, "You're going to come in and smack him one time." I said, "As soon as you punch him, I'm going to slide out of the ring. You come join me right away. Out we go." I said, "You got to do that right away," because I knew this town. The people were sitting real close to the ring. I knew, and there was a bunch of people sitting right on the aisle where the heels went in and out. And I knew that if we gave them time to register what we'd done, we wouldn't get out of there without an incident. So, everything's fine. The match goes great. Finally, Kevin's about ready to beat me. McGinnis runs in there and stops him and whacks him. And then, so I said, "Come on, let's go." And I slide out and I get like 2 steps and I don't hear anybody behind me. I look back. Well, when he whacked him, everybody, what people were there in the building. I don't remember it being a great big crowd. It was a smaller town. There was a heat. He got some serious heat. I look back, and McGinnis is looking around. He felt this heat. He got this heat. Oh my God, they're yelling at me for me, at me. What? And he had to go back and whack him again. And I jumped in the ring. I said, "Come on!" I grabbed him by the hair. "Come on!" It was too late. By the time we hit the floor, had 4 or 5 old, and then the people waiting for us. It wasn't like the Hell's Angels. It was like old men with canes. They were waiting to whack us, and hopefully we'd knock them down. They'd come to, they show up in court with a broken hip, broken neck. If they lived to be 500 and never have intimate relations with their wife again, all because you hit them on the way out of the wrestling match. So, even if your losses don't win, you have to pay an attorney. So, and you never can, believe me, you can't even get an attorney. Even back then, less than $1,000 just to talk to you. Yeah, that was another one where, boy, when he heard the heat, when he got heat, it just was like, I'm telling you, it was like I wouldn't know from experience, but I imagine it's what a heroin addict feels when he gets that first hit. Like, oh,
euphoria?
Yeah, like, oh, yeah.
So this is heat. I got to get some more of this.
That's what heels want, is heat, of course. And he didn't have, I don't know if you'd ever been in a position to have a ton of it.
No, I don't believe so. Again, like I said, they gave him the belt in Memphis, but you know how those reigns go up there or down there, wherever you might live. They're not very long. But he did come through there, and he went through a few other territories. But I'm not really seeing a whole lot in regards to him getting that major push to where he would have ever drawn any type of real heat. So I would imagine being involved in this angle is kind of not your bounty hunter, not your bodyguard, but just kind of your right-hand man, basically your hired hand, I should say, I guess. Your gunsel, as you call it. He's in a good position. You guys are drawing 12,000 at the Cow Palace. So even though he's working underneath you, he's still part of that storyline at this point. So he has a perfect opportunity. Sullivan's over as hell here as the top babyface.
Yeah, I mean, McGinnis might have made a couple $100 working first or second match in the Cow Palace, probably second. He might have made a couple $100 for going out there for 5-10 minutes. So yeah, it was, he didn't make that much in all the places, but Cow Palace was usually a fairly decent payoff. First thing, nobody in the law enforcement's looking for him out there in California. So, that was one thing he didn't have to worry about. I think it was too hot for him back in Boston. One other time, we were in Fresno, and we talked about Barry Orton, Barry O,
yes,
last week, and he and Barry had a match, and he was leaving. McGinnis was leaving. I think this was going to be one of his next to last matches. So when the guy's leaving, if Barry had been leaving, Barry would have beaten Barry in the match. But McGinnis is leaving. Barry's going to stay there. So Barry's going over in the match. So I got him in the dressing room, and I've got 10 things on my mind. I'm just going to give him a real simple finish. And so I'm kind of looking into space in between them. I've got them right in front of me. Both they're separated by, say, 2.5, 3 feet. Barry on my right, McGinnis on my left, and I'm kind of looking between them. I said, why don't we do this? You blah, blah, blah. And I'm giving them a finish. All of a sudden, I look up at Barry. And Barry's got his mouth open. He's got both his hands up, and he's shaking his head back and forth like no, and making these placating gestures with his hands like Frankenstein's about to, literally. So I look at him and I think, what's his problem? I see you doesn't seem to like to finish. I look at McGinnis. McGinnis is in the process of, he's poking his big pecs, his big pectoralis major, his big chest muscles.
Right.
And he's looking real pointedly at Barry's chest, which is about a third the size of his. Then he's got his bicep flexed, and he's poking that. And he's looking at Barry's arm, and he's got this look on his face like he'd like to eat Barry's arm. And I had a hard time not laughing out loud. But I said, Pat, cool it, man, cool it. What he was saying is that nobody's going to believe this kid can beat me. Is what he's saying, really.
Right. Yeah.
He couldn't believe it himself. I said, well, Pat, I'm not going to have him go out there and make you give up on the handshake. He's not going to overpower you. You're going to try to screw him and beating him in the finish. He's going to end up doing the same thing to you. Plus, you're going to trip over the referee. So, I mean, believe me, you got an out. But Barry was looking at having to go. Plus, they were all scared of McGinnis anyway. Shire was coming to the matches at that time. By that time, Shire, when he came to the matches, was going to the dressing room as far away from us as he could get. And on the counter next to wherever he was sitting in one of those star-turned dressing rooms, he had his pistol out, laying right on the counter. That's how nervous he was about maybe Pat McGinnis coming to see him.
So I'm assuming Pat did the job there, though, without any further issue.
Yeah, and because he didn't understand the business,
Right, sure.
If I'd asked him to let Barry smash him, give him a pile driver and beat him, he should have done it. It's a work.
Right.
This is real. Pat might be real to you, but other guys, you think anybody in real life would get in a ring with you?
So
you're out of your mind.
You had referenced Pat McGinnis taking issue or having some sort of altercations with Roy Shire. Does that take place while he's in the territory, or does that take place later down the road?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the altercation might have been facilitated by somebody whose name rhymes with Bob Roop. Might have said something to McGinnis. Roy Shire had a habit of stiffing guys. What he'd do is he paid 2 weeks behind, so that when you left, he owed you 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks you worked, he still hadn't paid you for. And a lot of guys he wouldn't pay. And the way the business worked, if a guy did that to me, I'd never come back there. I had alternatives in my life, so I didn't have to do pro wrestling. Guys whose choice of making good money is pro wrestling, or they're pumping gas or they're working menial jobs where they don't have anywhere near the money or the life, for that matter. They want to be able to always come back to a place. So if they want to come back to California a year or two later, they're not going to call Roy up and say, "Hey, you owe me those 2 weeks' pay." He just Roy. That's one of the reasons when I talked about not having respect for the guy in a past show. Anybody out there who's offended by that, you're going to hear more when we start talking about his associate promoters and how they felt about it. But things like that. So I told McGinnis about that. I told him early on because I needed a way. Roy didn't come anywhere near McGinnis, especially after I told him McGinnis might be thinking about killing him. What happened was I needed a way to keep Shire away from me because he would come in and it just upset the whole ambiance. We had a great time when he wasn't around. The boys were all happy. We were all making money. Like I said, beautiful territory, short trips. Guys got along. I didn't play any favorites. We were, everybody was respected and treated decently. It didn't matter if you were main event or opening match. Didn't matter. You're all given respect and treated. You're all necessary. guys put up the ring are necessary. You better be good to them. They're more necessary than anybody else, really. But it was good. And Shire would come around and walk around and strut around and everything. And even though the guys didn't have to listen to him, he didn't know how to make social talk and go up and say, "Hey, how's it going?" If he couldn't yell at a guy or try to show I'm the boss and you're the slave, he didn't know how to have a. But he would just his gloom doom attitude and it just put a kind of a pall. I wanted to keep him away. I mean, so I figured a way to do it was I told McGinnis that early on when I knew I think he gave me maybe a month's notice, maybe a month and a half, like I'm going to be out of here in 6 weeks. I think he had found out it was going to be safe for him to go back in 6 weeks. Go back and by the time the heat would have died back, whatever he did back east, or maybe his dog had digested that last face he ate. But so I told him, I said, now one thing you gotta look out for, Pat, is that Shire has a tendency to not pay guys. How we always get paid a couple weeks behind. I said, when you leave here, there's a chance he might not pay you.
That's probably the wrong guy.
well, we were in a place. I knew Roy could hear me. They had dressing rooms that had no roof, no ceiling. They were
right.
They had doors that shut, so you could have privacy. But it was like a theater type arena we were in. McGinnis said, "Well, for better not steal from me." He says, "I make a living out of making other guys pay what they owe my boss. If somebody owes me money, I'll kill him if I have to get the money." And I knew Shire heard that. I knew he heard it because I didn't see him. I didn't see him the rest of the night. So yeah, when he'd come to shows, he would sit sometimes a couple of floors up in a place that had 3 or 4 stories. He's behind the stage. He sit out way out in the wing somewhere. So it was a good way not to have him around.
Imagine that the promoter fears a preliminary guy, for lack of a better term, because of his shoot life.
Yeah, and of course Shire was on there. He said, "Well, what's his problem?" I said, "Well, I don't know. He heard from somebody that you stiff guys.
Probably from that Star Warrior."
Yeah, probably was. That guy, you couldn't trust him. The guy wore a mask to hide his face. Oh, my God. Yeah, so I said, I don't know where he heard it, but apparently thinks you're going to stiff him. Well, God, Shire was everything was, God, blah, blah, blah. He said, well, fire his ass. I said, well, no. I said, I don't want to, for one thing. I mean, he's over a little bit. People believe he's a nut job, because he is. I said, he's doing good. Why get rid of him? I said, before you go any further, Roy, I said, I'm in charge of the talent. I don't need to fire him. What are you worried about? I mean, are you going to do something to him? Is he going to want to kill you? Treat him right. You won't have a problem. Well, Shire's, he knew he was going to screw him. And so, yeah, he told me 2 or 3 times, you fire his ass. I said, I can't do it, Roy. I said, it's one of the reasons I had him involved with the angle with me and Kevin, because that gave McGinnis more than just being like a preliminary guy there, just that, you're interchangeable.
Right.
If it had been just that, I could have replaced him just with no problem if Shire had insisted, but I said no, because Shire didn't know what I had planned. All he knew that whatever I had planned that we had done so far, or what we had planned, I mean, all of us, Kevin and Smirnoff and Dean, whoever came up with ideas, all of us together, what we had planned, he didn't know how that was going to go, but what he knew was that what we'd done so far was going well, and it looked like it was going to continue to do that way. So, he didn't want to, kill the golden goose. And so when I told him, I said, well, Pat's figured in to deal with Kevin. I said, he's going to be leaving in 5-6 weeks, I think, so what is the problem? What problem do you have with him? I said, I didn't hear him say anything about you, but,
I'm going to assume McGinnis probably got his full pay because you never heard from him again. And Roy Shire lived to continue to promote for a while, and then, a few more years after that as well. So I'm going to assume Pat McGinnis got paid in full there. I'm sure it killed Roy inside, but at least it didn't kill him literally.
Yeah, he probably stiffed him. He probably didn't
You
pay him
think
what
so?
he should. What he had. Oh, I didn't. I'm sure he paid him something
Yeah.
because McGinnis was just the kind of guy who might walk out to the West Coast to kill you
Well,
if he felt like you stiffed him.
I've only been able thus far to find one match involving Pat McGinnis. It's actually a tag team match from Florida. And the only reason I think it even exists is, Japan, they were amazing at preserving footage. Their 70s footage looks like high definition today. And there's actually a match that I think it was Baba and maybe, I don't think it was Jumbo, it might have been Tenryu, but a couple of guys went down there for a tag team match, and McGinnis was one of the opponents. I think he teamed actually with Angelo Poffo. Imagine that. But that match was out there, so I just watched that this week, the McGinnis match, to familiarize myself with them outside of what I've read. So there may be a clip or two of him in Memphis, I don't recall, but not a whole lot of him out there. So that's pretty cool. And Rock Rims also sent me a picture of you and McGinnis in Modesto together, probably after a matchup. You guys have your hands raised in unison there. So that was pretty cool too. I actually went into my software and colorized it, and we'll be using that here on the show because it's just a pretty cool moment. It's like, wow. So, as you tell these stories, some of the videos are out there, a few pictures are out there. So we can kind of bring these stories back to life as best we can, them being well over, 45 years ago. But it's just been a blast thus far as we continue through this San Francisco trip, Bob, and we're running long on time, so we're going to wrap it up here in just a couple minutes. But I just wanted to mention, we're about 4 months now into this feud with Kevin Sullivan, about 2 months left in this feud, 3 big matches to go. We're going to touch on all of those next time, run right through those, and we're going to get into what everybody's really been dying and they're waiting for. Actually, I say that's going to happen next time. That'll actually happen in 2 weeks' time, guys, because next time out, heading into Christmas, we're going to drop on December 20th, Ask Bob Anything, the episode upcoming, Bob. It's going to be a blast. Everybody have been sending in tons of emails and DMs asking various questions from all throughout your history as a wrestler and working behind the scenes as well. And guys, if you want to get those questions in, you better do so now. The deadline is December 17th. I'm going to zip it up that day. So if you want to get it in, email me at wrestlecopia@gmail.com. That's wrestlecopia@gmail.com, or DM me on Twitter or Facebook. And the subject title in that email, please label it Ask Bob. And we will do our best to get everything on there. And whatever we don't, hey, it'll always be there for Ask Bob number 2. So I'm looking forward to that. We're going to go all over the place.
Well, that all sounds really great, Ray. I tell you, I'm enjoying the heck out of this. One last thing before we go.
Absolutely.
Again, about, there's no worry about kayfabe. The business has been, they want to say exposed, but my philosophy in talking about this is that what goes on behind the scenes, what you see out front is staged, it's choreographed. I mean, not everything, but the angles, they're all preconceived. What goes on behind the scenes isn't. That's stuff that happens, like with McGinnis. I never thought McGinnis would come and be able to provide me with this kind of weapon against Shire. I had no idea.
Or this entertainment.
So, yeah, I mean, exactly. When you have these things happen, to me, to honor the fans out there, the people who paid my living or helped me make my living all those years back, and still do. When I went to Charlotte last year, I got paid to be there. And the people that bought tickets to come to the convention, they helped pay me. So when I'm talking to you, I want to tell you what was going on behind the scene, because that was real. And it's a lot more interesting than what happened out in the ring.
Right.
What happened out in the ring was all predictable. There's only so many finishers you can have. And you see them all. You just keep, what happens to make them different? You see them with different people. But it's the same old stuff. Behind the scenes, that's different. It's not always the same. You got new stuff. You got stuff that happens only in some of the stuff might have happened somewhere else, but I doubt it. I doubt if anybody else ever had Barry O and McGinnis together, and McGinnis having Barry almost wet his pants, wet his wrestling tights before the match. But I left out one thing. After Barry beat McGinnis in that match,
yeah.
Do you think I got out of the ring quick in the Cow Palace after dumping old man Sullivan? Barry was out of that ring on the 3.5 count. On 1, 2, 3. By 3.5, he was halfway back up the aisle. he wasn't going to give McGinnis a chance to get any payback. Yeah.
I'm so glad you had a story with Barry because we talked about him a little bit last week. You bring him up this week, and he's going to play a pivotal part in a small part, I guess, but it becomes a much larger piece to a puzzle here in this Kevin Sullivan feud. Is Kevin going to wind up teaming with Barry Orton for a match? And now that Pat McGinnis is gone from the territory, maybe your next Gunsel very well could be Barry O. We'll just have to wait and see next time around, but that's just a little teaser, guys, of what's to come as this feud will continue on all the way into the month of December. And then, of course, from there, we're going to talk all about the demise of your, I guess you could call it a relationship with Roy Shire. So all the good stuff still coming, guys, as we continue to sell the Cow Palace out month after month, at least 12,000 strong each and every time. And it's amazing. And I totally buy it just based on the storylines alone. So it's been a blast thus far covering San Francisco. Probably likely a couple more episodes still to come here in the San Francisco territory before we tackle even bigger and I don't know if I want to call it better, but tons more great stories. Very different indeed.
Different, yeah. But they're all good. I mean, they're not all positive, but they're good stories. Some of them, have negative sides to them, but they're interesting. I mean, again, me and Dick Slater getting into a fist fight. Well, actually, I had a blackjack, but he was stupid enough just to bring his fist. But getting in a bar in Knoxville. I mean, I don't know if anybody even knows about that, except the guys that were there. That's just interesting to me because it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen out.
Right.
I didn't see anything like happen out in real life. But
some of the things that happened behind the scenes, if you will, were far more interesting than maybe some of the things that even transpired in the ring. And that's really what we're here for you to tell all of these stories that everybody saw this match or that match. Everybody saw the Junkyard Dog pin you flat in the middle of the ring, but it's all the stories going on that led up to that behind the scenes that just is equally intriguing to me. And I'm sure to all the listeners out there as well. And that's what, we're doing this, I think, for us to get everything out there, just share not just your life story, but any encounter you recall that happened. Let's share professional wrestling history, really is what this is. It's bigger than just Bob Roop, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Of course. It is. And I think that, anybody who tunes into this show or comes to conventions or whatever, I think that you're owed, you don't have to talk to me. You don't have to come to anything I'm involved with if you don't want to hear my way of talking about things. That's fine. If you want to, believe that, okay, everything I saw was real and that's what you saw was what you got. But what you saw is in many cases much less interesting than how it got there, how you saw it, how you were in a position to see it. And that's what I want to share. I feel like fans deserve to know that because they know that wrestling. Now, believe me, the wrestling is real. We're not trying to hurt each other, but when you get run into steel poles and get slammed and, get hit with chairs and all that, that's real. It does hurt sometimes. Guys are not always real capable of stuff they do. So we got hurt. I was sore for 15 years. But, we were trying to kill each other. My career wouldn't last 15 days.
That's true.
Yeah. So, first of all, I feel I have the right to share it, but I had to experience it. For every 10 minutes I spent in the ring, I probably spent 10 hours on the road. So all in all, so believe me, these stories have been paid for in advance, and now I'm sharing them with you. So I appreciate y'all. Again, I appreciate anybody out there who's listening to this. I appreciate you being there. I enjoy sharing my time and in a way sharing my life with you. I appreciate those of you who post or whatever, but whether you do or not, that didn't matter. Best wishes to you. You all stay well.
All right, that's going to wrap us up here, guys. Just a reminder once again to everybody, you guys can friend Bob Roop over at facebook.com/poorBobRoop. He's looking forward to hearing from you. And you guys can also follow me on Twitter. Well, now it's X. You guys can find me there at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. And once again, it has been the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob, I want to thank you again for allowing me to join you here on this awesome voyage.
Well, thank you, Ray. We're actually in. You think about it, my friend, I couldn't do it without you. We're in this together, and I'm really happy about that. You're my newest tag team partner, and I'm really enjoying our linking up, my friend. Thanks a lot.
Well, I'll take that any day. Tag team partners with Bob Roop. All right, guys, we'll see you again next week when it's Ask Bob Anything, dropping December 20th. Be sure to check back then for another edition of the Wrestling Stoop.